Hello everybody and welcome to another video. So, welcome. My nose is itchy and my eye is itchy. I'm just itchy. So, apologies for the unintended short hiatus there. Basically what happened was after I finished the last video, I got edits back for one of the queer young adult novels that I have coming out. Looks like it's going to be early next year, but in any case, so the deadline was pretty tight, so I basically spent like every available free second working on that. And then after that was done, I had to go to my first trade show for my job. And as an introvert with anxiety who works from home and is not accustomed to being around a lot of people, it required a lot. And so I needed like the whole following week to recover. And now here we are. Anyway, so let's move on to the actual thing that we're watching today, which is the second half of episode 7 of season 2. All right, let's watch.
Go on!
All right, so we have Stefan and David watching some variety of sports ball. I'm going to assume it's rugby. It could be soccer/football, but I do not know because I am not a sports person. Athletes are running around and some kind of ball is involved, and Stefan and David are very into it. But yeah, so we will talk more about like David, but I think it's pretty clear that David really idolizes his dad. Sarah and Nick are really similar and they get along really well, and like, you know, a parent is never going to say like this child is my favorite, but let's be real, like Sarah and Nick have a deep connection that Sarah and David clearly do not. Just, you know, they're similar kinds of people. With Sarah and Nick having that close connection, maybe David and Stefan similarly had a close connection, or David wanted to have that close connection with his dad. So I can see him resenting Nick, first of all, for being like the cute baby of the family, who I'm sure everyone doted on, and David as kind of the left out older child. But also there's just the fact that like David longs for that parental connection and he doesn't really feel it. Like Sarah treats him, you know, I'm sure Sarah loves him very much and like tries to be there for him as much as she can, but they just don't mesh the way that Sarah and Nick do. So I can understand David feeling kind of, you know, bereft parentally and longing for that kind of connection and reaching for his dad, who is always just, you know, really inconsistent. I also think it's really interesting that, like, once again, sports is the way that sports seems to be the only thing that Stefan is able to connect with his children about. So he's always talking to Nick about, oh, rugby, and now here he is watching sports with David. And, like, he and David aren't talking to each other. They're not, like, connecting. They're both focused on the sport and are only interacting with each other as it relates to the sport that they're watching. Anyway, let's get more than 2 seconds into it.
Do we need to pretend to be platonic BFFs in front of your dad?
I'm gonna tell him about us tonight.
We're kissing in the front yard. I love that the discussion is, so do we need to be platonic in front of your dad? Yes. Immediate kiss. Immediate kiss in full view of the windows on the front lawn. I mean, it's not a big deal because Nick is so beyond ready to be out at this point. Like, he's so done with everything, with like hiding his relationship with Charlie, and he's planning to tell his dad tonight anyway. So if his dad happened to be looking out the window at that exact moment, oh well.
I'm here for you, mate.
You did not just call me mate.
Pal. Bro.
So I like that as we have Charlie reciting all these like mask names that guys call each other, we hear Stefan yelling in the background to a sports match, which is of course the ultimate mask bro mate kind of activity.
Nick.
The way that Stefan greets Nick is like a bro slap and knuckle and fist bump kind of situation. Like, Nick's like, "You're my dad." Like, what is this?
Et ton ami,
Charlie.
And of course, forgetting Charlie's name, being like, ton ami.
yeah, Charlie. Good to see you again.
Oh my god, look at David's face. David has this smug, knowing smile on his face as he looks at Nick and Charlie, like, thinking of all the terrible things he's going to do.
You guys should come and join us. Look, it's Toulouse and Montpellier.
All right, let's go. See, I told you.
Shall I lay the table, Sarah?
Oh, you are a good boy.
So this is another kind of stereotypical feminine, masculine division here, where we have like the guys sitting on the couch watching sports while the woman is in the kitchen cooking. Nick and Charlie come into the room on the guy side where like the sports are going on and stuff like that, and they're even invited to join in, but they don't stay in this hyper masculine, bro mate kind of space. They cross over into the quote-unquote feminine side, Charlie helping out Sarah by laying the table, and Nick having a discussion about feelings with Sarah. So it's interesting that we get to see them kind of cross from the stereotypical masculine into the stereotypical feminine in this one scene here.
How's it been since he got here?
It's been fine. It's been fine.
Yeah, Nick checking in with his mom, which is lovely, because it's got to be rough for her. Like, ugh. And Sarah, after saying it's fine, is immediately looking at Nick, being like, "Is it fine for you?" And it's just wonderful how in tune they are to each other's feelings.
He doesn't have to know, sweetheart. He's got no right to know. You don't owe him a thing.
Yeah, and she immediately knows what he's thinking about and what he's worrying about, and tells him, like, reassures him, you don't owe him anything. You don't have to tell him if you don't want to.
Thanks for coming.
And here are the Springs.
I grew up in the south of France, near Narbonne.
So Nick and Charlie sitting like shoulder to shoulder, Sarah and Jane facing each other at the heads of the table, which is interesting because Sarah and Jane are really the heads of their respective households. No offense to Julio Spring, but he more defers to her. And then we have David and Tori kind of in the middle. I like that Tori is seated directly across from Charlie, which kind of shows how she's watching over him, and also she has to be next to David because that enables her to do what she does later, which is wonderful.
Family tree story is a long story.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we have Charlie kind of like just cutting things on his plate, but not actually eating anything, to kind of give the illusion of eating without actually doing it.
Do you visit often, Stefan?
As much as I can. My job, it keeps me very busy.
And like watching Sarah's face during this whole dinner scene is highly recommended, because the expression, like Stefan saying that he visits as much as he can, Nick is just staring at him like, "Are you serious right now?"
You should see some of the places Dad renovates. Insane.
Work isn't everything,
I said in the last video, but I do think David, despite being awful, is quite a sad character. David is constantly making these attempts to connect with Stefan or to like win favorite son points with him, and he's shot down every time. Like, and in this case he's like, "Oh yeah, dad renovates these buildings, they're really cool, you should see them." And Stefan's like, "Well, work isn't everything." Like, he basically completely dismisses what David has said and brushes it off and is basically saying like, "No, you're wrong. That is not what we should be focusing on." Which is kind of ridiculous, given that we've seen that Stefan devotes everything to his work rather than his sons. Even when he was at the cafe with Nick and Charlie in Paris, he's like, "Oh yeah, I got this phone call from work. I can't get out of it. I'm sorry, I have to go." And whether or not that was genuine, I mean, leave it up to you, but to consider. But the fact is that like Stefan genuinely has prioritized work over his family, over people, and the relationships in his life. Again, it's interesting that Stefan always seems to be trying to play the role that he's not. Like, when he was at the cafe with Nick, he was like all smiles and trying to pretend like he's not the absent father that he is. And here also at dinner with the Springs, he's putting on this aura of being like just this cheerful guy who like wishes that he could spend more time with his family, but alas, he can't because he's in France and there's work and blah, 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 blah.
Work isn't everything, you know.
We get a wonderful eye roll from Tori there.
Dad, has Nick told you how he met Charlie?
No, he hasn't.
It's also very interesting that right after David gets kind of shut down by his dad, he immediately is like, okay, well, let's see who the favorite son is, and shifts things over to Nick. David, up until now, has not brought anything up about Nick, but he's been shut down by his dad, and now he's like, let's turn the focus over to Nick, because he knows that it will get a reaction out of Nick and make himself look better. Whether that's something that he's thinking subconsciously or consciously, nonetheless, I do think that's what's going on here.
We got sat together in school and then Charlie joined the rugby team.
You play rugby, Charlie.
I'm not very good.
Now, I do like that, like, we give Jane a lot of grief because she's definitely a strict parent, and it's clear that she loves Charlie, and Tori, obviously, but, like, she doesn't know how to properly relate to him. But I love that in this moment, when Charlie says he's not very good at rugby, Jane has this look on her face, despite, like, as far as we know, never having been to any of his games, but she shakes her head like, no, that's not true. Don't say that. You're great. So it's nice to see that even though she is such a strict parent and, like, gives this aura of disapproval, nonetheless, she's still like, no, you're awesome. Charlie, you're my son. You're great.
And Nick was obsessed with getting Charlie to join. Wonder why.
What is your problem?
You tell him, Tori. There's all this silence and tension going on here. And as always, I love the subtle, like, facial expressions going on Kit's face while he's acting this scene.
I played rugby when I was in university.
Stefan doesn't notice that anything's weird because, like, it would not even occur to him that Nick would be in a relationship with Charlie.
It's a very attractive sport to women.
And we get a lovely eye roll from Sarah because, of course, like Stefan, every time we have a scene with him, he's like, sports, girls, sports, girls, girls, sports, girls, sports. So it's like these are the only things that he brings up in the presence of his sons. Like, how's the rugby going? And also, rugby could get you a girlfriend. That's it.
Have neither of you boys found girlfriends?
Have neither of you boys found girlfriends? And Charlie just, like, looks over, gets some side eye going on.
Yeah, I'm not sure Nick's too interested in looking for girlfriends, really.
Don't you dare.
I love that Tori does this, obviously, but I also love that she doesn't tap his arm, she doesn't grab his arm, she, like, digs her nails into his flesh, like, no, you do not do this to Nick and Charlie. And it's also great, like, obviously Tori here is protecting Charlie, but the person that she's protecting the most here is Nick. And it's good to see this change after, like, we had the moment in episode 3 where they went to the party in the woods and, you know, Tori was kind of hard on Nick where she was like, you know, you look after Charlie or you die. And then when Nick lost Charlie, she was a little bit harsher with him than I think she meant to be, saying, like, you're not very good at keeping your promises, are you? And seeing how much that devastated him, and also that he clearly was not feeling well but was very, like, determined to find Charlie and take care of him. I think Tori at that moment kind of realized that, you know, no, Nick is not someone you need to be afraid of in terms of him hurting Charlie. And in fact, you need to include him in your circle of sisterly protection. So it's good to see that we've reached the point now where Tori is including Nick in her protectiveness because, like, he needs it in this situation.
David, be respectful, please, at the table. We have guests.
Why do you always do this?
I'm just trying to help.
I'm just trying to help.
Sorry, this is ridiculous.
And this is a wonderful fuck it moment for Nick.
Charlie's my boyfriend. Surprise. I'm bi, he's gay, and I was actually really stressed out about how I was going to tell you. But you know what? I don't care what you think about it anymore. Because you don't care to even see us more than 2 times a year.
That speech from Nick, I love that in this episode, so I like that we get to see Charlie telling off Ben, and then we get to see Nick just telling absolute truth to his dad and to David, and just like doing an amazing job of explaining exactly what he's feeling and why.
And I don't know why you're acting like you are 10 years old, but your bullying just doesn't affect me anymore because, quite simply, I do not care. I like who I am. I like my life. Maybe you should stay with Dad next time. Sorry, no.
I love this moment for Nick. Every time Nick comes out, it has kind of a different mood to it because he's coming out to different people. When he comes out to Tara, it's kind of like a nervous, excited, like this is the first person I'm telling. When he comes out to Elle at the Milkshake Cafe, he's just, he's happy and relaxed and, just enjoying being with people he trusts. When he comes out to his mom, it's very emotional and, fearful because it's very scary to tell a parent, your sexuality when you're afraid. So, like, the fact that when Nick tells Sarah about his sexuality, he's so, keyed up and emotional and, like, tears in his eyes because she means so much to him and her presence in his life is so important that, having her not accept him is just the highest stakes possible. But in this situation, when he's facing his dad, he's come through this journey of, like, trying to connect with his dad, doing everything he could to connect with him, and finally realizing, like, what does it even matter? This guy clearly is not willing to spend the time or energy to get to know me, so why am I even worrying about how he's going to react? If Stefan decided today to be a homophobic piece of crap and, cast Nick out of his life, Nick's life would not change all that much. So I think that Nick has realized that, like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's just get this out because, as we've established, he's tired of hiding his relationship with Charlie. He's tired of all the pain that it's causing Charlie and all the pain that it's causing himself. So he just has this wonderful fuck it moment of, like, yeah, I'm bi, he's gay, he's my boyfriend. That's it. That's all. And I also love that he accuses David, rightfully so, of acting like a 10-year-old. And I would be very interested to know how old they were when Stefan and Sarah separated. Because maybe David was 10 years old at that time, and mentally he's trapped in that place when it comes to dealing with Nick.
Let him speak to us like that.
Oh, David, be quiet. We've heard quite enough from you, thank
It's
you.
Nick that's making a scene. Always causing a fuss.
Yeah, and David saying, Nick is causing a scene, Nick is causing a fuss, when, like, David... So, yeah, David is one of those kids who I'm sure would, like, poke you and poke you and poke you, or, like, do the, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you, and then, when the person they're doing that to gets upset, rightfully, they're like, what's wrong with you? You're always causing a fuss.
Dad agrees.
You have not grown up into the man I had hoped you would be, David.
Here again, we have the situation of David trying again to forge some kind of connection with his dad. And I think that going into this, David clearly thought that his dad would disapprove of Nick's relationship with Charlie. And, we heard him say it himself in episode 2, like, wait till Dad finds out, or whatever he said there. So here, too, he's like, oh yeah, Dad agrees with me. Dad also thinks that Nick was being a drama queen or something like that. And then David once again is shot down by his dad. So, like, David is constantly trying to get in his dad's good graces by shitting on Nick. So, like, I think David sees it as a competition between him and Nick, and I'm sure it bothers him that, like, between the two of them, like, obviously Nick is light years more mature than David is, despite David being the older sibling by quite a few years. And Nick is just such a good person, and I think that, like, David thinks that if he makes Nick look worse, he will rise to being the favored child among his parents, or at least his dad. So he's always taking these attempts to cut Nick down so he himself will be lifted up. And it never really works out for him.
As if you have any right to say that. You barely see your children.
I love that Sarah has clearly been, like, holding her tongue this entire time. Like, all the talk that's gone before now, she's just been quiet. She's been rolling her eyes and like looking very like but now finally she busts out and it's kind of nice because like, you know, David is her child despite the fact that he's a bit of a shit. I'm sure that Sarah can recognize where this is coming from with David, like the fact that he is clearly just desperate for his father's approval. And here's his father shooting him down again and again and again. So, like, what Sarah says here is very much shutting Stefan down, but also kind of protecting David at the same time. So, you know, I think that's nice in terms of Sarah as a mother. Clearly, like, Nick is the child she gets along better with, but David is still her kid. And, you know, he was clearly hurt a great deal by the divorce and everything that happened after that, and he just has a lot of issues he needs to work through, but he's still her child. And then we have some nice communication between the Springs where, like, Julio kind of nodding at Charlie and being like, yeah, go ahead. So Charlie runs after Nick.
You okay? I actually think I am. Didn't mean for it to happen that way, but felt good to say it.
Do you want a hug anyway?
Of course he wants a hug.
Sorry.
Well, I'm pleased you said what you said. You needed to hear it.
So this is another one of the sorries that we have in this episode. Nick says sorry to his mom 2 times in this scene. And both times, like, obviously he should not be saying the S word in this situation because he did nothing wrong. And she immediately reassures him, like, no, you know, you did great. He needed to hear that.
Why doesn't he care?
And this question, why doesn't he care, is just so heartbreaking and must be something that Nick has carried with him for a really long time. Because, you know, clearly over the course of his childhood and his teen years here up until the present day, like, Nick has been trying to maintain a relationship with his dad. He's been trying to reach out to him again and again and again and just constantly being ignored or, you know, treated like just someone that his dad is not interested in getting to know. So I can definitely understand why he would want to ask this question of just, why doesn't my dad care about me? It's a really heartbreaking question, but unfortunately one that sometimes kids need to ask.
I wish I understood, but I don't. I think it's a very sad way to exist.
Yeah, and a perfect response from Sarah. Like, I don't understand, and I think it's a very sad way to exist. And it's interesting too that, like, Sarah uses the expression I don't understand, and this is the same thing that Stefan says later regarding, I guess, queer relationships. He's like, I don't really understand these things. Oh, and then a hug from Sarah. And I love that we have, like, after this very important moment in Nick's life where he's come out to his dad and stood up to his older brother, he has Charlie on one side and Sarah on the other, just kind of, like, surrounding him with love and support. Like, the 2 most important people in his life right there for him. Meow, I know.
Leaving then?
And Stefan was seriously about to just leave. Just walk out the door without saying goodbye to anybody.
I'm sorry. I want to be better.
And here we have another sorry. I do wonder if Nick had not stopped him here, if Nick had not, like, caught Stefan about to walk out, would Stefan have actually apologized to him? Would they have had this talk? I don't know. I kind of don't think that they would have. Oh my god, is the heat actually coming on? It has been fucking freezing all day. Maybe the heat is actually coming on. It smells a little bit like Bernie, which suggests... So either the building's on fire or the heat is coming on. And either way, I'm going to be warmer, so that's good.
Show it then. And just say it.
The camera in this case is kind of pulled back a bit, so we can really see the space. We can really see the... I'm trying to get both of my hands in frame. We can really see the gap. We can really see the space between Nick and his dad here, and even the camera is even farther back. So we have this feeling of space between them. And I love that Nick does not immediately, like... Because, you know, in the past, I'm sure Nick has accepted his dad's, you know, empty promises and his excuses and things like that. But here, his dad says, I'm sorry, I want to be better. And Nick's like, great, show it. Show that you want to be better. Don't just say it. Because that's all that Stefan does. Like, he talks a good game about being a good parent, but he doesn't actually do it.
Dad, you going?
Yeah.
I think this scene is one of the most telling in terms of how David feels about his dad, because you can hear kind of the hurt in his voice that Stefan is leaving and was going to leave without saying goodbye.
Call me when you get back to Hindenburg, huh?
Glasgow.
Even David looks like he might be reaching the point of being tired of his dad's bullshit. So we have like a hug here, and David's still looking kind of unhappy with the whole situation.
It was nice to meet your boyfriend.
And now we have Nick and his dad a little bit closer, but the body language here, of course, we have Nick once again folding his arms in the classic protective stance and kind of standing quite... I like that Nick is very, like, straight-backed here as he's kind of standing his ground against his dad.
I don't really understand these things, but it seems like a very nice young man.
And I do really like that Stefan says this. Like, it would have been very easy for them to take the route of having Stefan be just, you know, some homophobic nightmare.
He is. Bye, Dad.
And I love that finally here, Nick is the one who says bye. And he does it still with his arms folded. There's no indication that he wants to, like, embrace his dad. He's giving his dad a very clear message here of, this time I am making the choice to say goodbye to you. And whether you come back into my life, that's going to be up to you. So I think it's clear at this point that, like, Nick is not going to be chasing down his dad anymore. If his dad wants to be in his life, he's going to have to actually step it up and do something about it. And Stefan gives him the little, like, arm pat. Again, a very bro thing to do. Yeah, Nick watching him go. And then closing the door. And here we go.
He's made such a big deal out of telling our dad. Such an attention seeker.
The fact that David, I mean, we saw this with Ben, where, like, Ben was always projecting his own issues onto other people. And David, too. Like, David accusing Nick of causing a scene, accusing Nick of being an attention seeker. Clearly, these are David taking things that are true about himself and being like, ooh, Nick.
Drama queen boyfriend's influence.
And calling Charlie a drama queen, like, what are you even drawing this from? Like, you've had no interaction with Charlie where he's been anything but, like, quiet and polite. So, how dare you?
That's it.
This is exactly the same way the shot is in the comics. But I love that we're, like, looking up at Tori as this, like, looming gothic figure of darkness who's just going to destroy you if you're not careful.
Talk about my brother like that again, and I'll end you.
And David looks scared, and he should, because, like, if anybody's going to legitimately murder someone, it's Tori. And he does not say a word. Like, David is never without a comeback, and after Tori gets done with him, he has nothing to say.
Takes a lot for Nick to stand up to David like that. He must care for Charlie very deeply.
I love that Sarah says this. It takes a lot for Nick to stand up to David like that. Now that that Jane and Julio have met Nick and Sarah, I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense that Jane really changes her tune here. Seeing just what a wonderful, warm person Sarah is, and also seeing what a mature, like, wonderful person Nick is, and also how much he clearly cares about Charlie. Okay, so Tori's asking, you okay? To Nick. So once again, in terms of Tori accepting Nick into the circle of her protection, her sisterly protection, we have Tori and Nick and Charlie walking, and Tori asks Nick, are you okay? And Nick says, yeah, fine.
He's a nice boy, and maybe we could have him and Sarah around in a few weeks.
And then we hear, like, Nick and Tori talking quietly in the background, and then we just hear Tori say, your brother's a prick. Which, yes, he is. And it sounds like Nick, this is not in the subtitles, but it sounds like Nick says he's always been like that, or something like that. So, yeah. But in any case, it's nice that that Jane has made a turnaround in terms of Nick, because, you know, obviously before she was only seeing the side of things of like Charlie starts going out with Nick, suddenly Charlie's grades are suffering. So she made that connection of like, therefore Nick must be a horrible influence on him. But now that she's met him and his mother and like seen all the wonderfulness that is imbued in those two members of the Nelson family, she suddenly comes around.
Prom tomorrow?
We're still going together? Like, together.
Yeah, don't you want to?
So we have a nice little parent-appropriate kiss from Nick and Charlie. And another instance of Charlie being hesitant about the idea of him and Nick going to the prom together, which I assume just feeds back into the idea of Charlie not liking being the center of attention and also being worried about Nick being bullied like he was. So it's pretty clear that he's stressing a lot about what might happen when they go to the prom together.
Charlie didn't eat very much.
Yeah. This finally causes Nick to try to find out some more information about what Charlie might be dealing with in terms of his eating disorder. And it's interesting that all this is going on, like, while he's right next to his mom, where, like, she's not looking at him, she's not aware that he's looking at something so serious on his phone, or that, you know, her casual comment about Charlie not eating very much has triggered something so huge in him. But nonetheless, it's nice that she's kind of a silent support there, that she's there while he's doing this, and will be there for him in the future, you know, when we get into the next season. Oh god, I can't even, like, this scene is so difficult to watch. It sucks that Darcy looks so happy in this picture that she sends to Tara. And the fact that, like, her mom starts off by laughing at her is just, like, oh my god.
You can't wear that. I want to wear this. I'm wearing it.
There's so much condescension going on from her mom. She's like, oh, darling, you can't wear that. Like, she looks at Darcy like Darcy is some silly child who's put on, like, a tutu and a football jersey and flip-flops and wants to wear it to kindergarten, which, I mean, why not? Slay. But, you know, she's clearly treating Darcy like a child here, and more than that is being awfully homophobic. So we start with the laughter, laughing at her, mocking her, and then we go into straight up anger of ordering her to take it off. Yeah, so they will not laugh, my friends are supportive. So, this scene, this scene is difficult for me in particular because I experienced a pretty similar thing when I was in my first year of college. The emotionally abusive person I had been dating invited me to go. So he was a year behind me in school. So he was a senior in high school. I was a freshman in college, and I had broken up with him. I genuinely have no memory of how that went down, except that I remember telling someone that I had broken up with him. In any case, like, he asked me to go to the winter formal at our high school with him as friends, and I said yes. But I told him I will only go if I wear a suit. And he's like, yeah, fine. So I went home for winter break, and I told my mom that I was going to the formal with my ex-boyfriend and wearing a suit. And so we had a very, very big argument about it because she said the same thing. She said, everyone's going to laugh at you. You're going to get beaten up in the parking lot. Like, I think it's important to make the distinction that, like, Darcy's mother is coming from a perspective of homophobia and probably wanting to uphold a certain image, whereas my mom was coming at it from fear. So my mom was afraid that I was going to be literally, like, murdered in the parking lot for wearing a suit to the formal. We argued about it so much, and literally just yelling and screaming at each other over this. I went and I wore the suit and it was fine. Like, people, I think I've told this story before. I don't remember if I've done it in a video. I know I did it in a blog post a while back, but, like, my ex and I got to the got to the dance. I got a few double takes from like the teachers at the door and some other people, but the cool girls in the marching band drum line were like, that's awesome, that's badass, you're a boss. So like I got a lot of positive feedback from pretty much everybody I spoke to. And the only person who got, not really bullied, but the only person who got any flack that night was my ex. So like the guys he was friends with were basically asking him if he was gay the whole time, joking with him about whether this was his way of telling them that he was gay or something. Because, you know, I rocked up to the winter formal with short hair, wearing a suit, and yeah, so like it sucks that like that was the response, that people responded with like, oh, are you gay, to him, but I didn't feel bad that he was suffering, to be honest, because he put me through a lot of shit, and this was clearly him attempting to like reel me back in. But in any case, all of that is to say, I really relate to Darcy in the scene, and like thankfully my own mother's motivations for being against me dressing in this way were not homophobic in nature. They were not coming from her being an awful person. They were just coming from her being genuinely worried for my safety. You know, obviously it was not the right way to go about it, screaming at me about it and like saying everybody's gonna laugh at you regardless. So getting back to Darcy and her horrible mother, and the fact that Darcy says, my friends are supportive, my friends like me, and her mom like smiles and shakes her head like, oh darling, you're so silly to think that anyone would like and support you, ha 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 ha. This is something that I've noticed quite a few reactors miss, but Darcy's mother literally says, get out. So Darcy is not the one who decides to leave. Darcy doesn't like grab her stuff and go unprovoked. Her mother literally says, get out. And you can see her saying, mouthing, how dare you speak to me like that, or something like that. Everything is just riding on emotion and like, okay, yeah, get out, all right, I'm going, and grabs her stuff and leaves. And then there's this moment after Darcy steps out of the house where you can see it all hit her like, shit, what do I do now? Where do I go? And then this moment when she hesitates and looks around and looks back and is like, do I go back in? Do I apologize? What do I do? And it's cold enough that she can see her breath, and she's not wearing a coat. And she spends the whole night in the park, so that is pretty disturbing right there. All the episode 7s just have to end with something horrible. So that is the end of episode 7. This is definitely a really important episode in terms of all the things that happen in it. Almost too much. Like, I would say this episode is the most jam-packed of any. So much happens in this episode. But we do have the two big highlights of, like, Charlie telling off Ben, Nick telling off his dad and David. But yeah, so then after this, we're moving right into the final episode, episode 8, which has... I will have a lot to say. So it's a good thing that we're splitting episode 8 into 2. Okay, but I'm going to wrap it up here because we're at an hour and 15 minutes and it's lunchtime and I want to eat food. So, and also Darla is like probably wanting to leave my bedroom because she's been sitting patiently waiting. All right, so yeah, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your patience. And thank you, as always, to our patrons who are absolutely amazing and wonderful and fantastic. And a special shout out to our Nick Nelson members, Paul Z, Kelly Walker, and Kent Smither. Okay, well, that's going to do it for today. So I will see you guys next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day or night or whatever time of day it may happen to be. And I'll see you again.